The night the lake changed, it didn't start with sirens or shouting. It started with the water going still in a way I'd never seen before. No ripples, no movement, just silence, thick and uneasy. I remember standing on the old wooden dock with my fishing rod resting against my knee, watching the moon reflect off the surface, thinking how peaceful everything felt. It should have been another quiet evening of fishing after work. Instead, it became the beginning of a nightmare no one in our community was ready for. I'd moved into the neighborhood about 6 months earlier. A small, picture-perfect place wrapped around a shared lake that fed into the community's water system. For most people, the lake was just scenery. For me, it was sanctuary. Fishing helped me clear my head, especially after the long days and lonely nights that came with starting over in a new town. I kept to myself, followed the HOA rules, and stayed respectful. But not everyone wanted me there. That's when I first noticed her. The woman everyone referred to as the HOA Karen. She walked the paths like she owned them, clipboard always tucked under her arm, eyes sharp and judgmental. She made it clear, subtly at first, that my fishing bothered her. Claimed it was unsightly. Claimed it drove down property value. Every conversation ended with the same warning. The homeowners association could step in. I thought it was empty talk, until the fish began floating. One morning, the water had a strange chemical smell, barely noticeable unless you stood close to the shore. By noon, neighbors were whispering. By evening, kids were pulled away from the playground while adults stood staring at the lake in stunned silence. Dead fish scattered across the edges like broken secrets no one wanted to speak out loud. The HOA immediately labeled it an environmental accident. Routine algae bloom, they said. Natural causes. No danger to the community water. But nothing about it felt natural. I saw her again that night across the lake path, standing too still, watching too hard. When our eyes met, she looked away fast. But not before I caught a hint of something on her face that didn't match concern. Relief. That's when the question burned into my mind. Was this really an accident? Or had someone poisoned the lake to stop me from fishing? And if I was right, why would anyone risk contaminating the very water the entire community depended on? I reached for my phone, ready to record the truth, when I noticed something moving at the water's edge that made my stomach drop. My stomach stayed twisted for days after that night. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not just with the lake, but with the way the entire situation was being handled. The HOA sent out emails assuring everyone the community water was tested and safe. Yet nobody ever explained the smell, the dead fish, or why the shoreline had suddenly been roped off without warning. It all felt rushed, like damage control rather than answers. I started paying closer attention to things I'd previously ignored. The old security cameras near the lake didn't point directly at the water anymore. They were angled toward the parking lot instead. Maintenance logs posted on the community board had missing timestamps around the exact window when the poisoning was said to have happened. And the night watch guard mentioned, too casually, that he'd been told to take the long route that evening, leaving the lake unattended for more than an hour. Then there was her. The HOA Karen had been vocal about my fishing long before the incident. I later learned she had filed 3 written complaints against me, claiming I was littering bait containers, disturbing wildlife, and drawing outsiders to the lake. None of it was true. I always cleaned up after myself, followed the fishing regulations, and never brought anyone with me. But those complaints built a paper trail that suddenly felt less like annoyance, and more like preparation. What made things harder was how alone I felt in all of it. Most neighbors avoided talking about the lake entirely, worried about HOA fines or being labeled troublemakers. Even the woman I'd grown close to, the only person who knew how much fishing meant to me, urged me to let it go. She said fighting the HOA could turn ugly, that people like her always found a way to twist the story. But letting it go meant accepting that someone might have poisoned water the entire community depended on, and that scared me more than any HOA threat ever could. One evening, I walked the closed-off trail as the sun dipped beneath the treeline. The air still carried that faint chemical bite. Near the edge, half hidden in the grass, I noticed a small clear bottle with no label, empty but stained on the inside with cloudy residue. I froze. the kind of container you'd never expect near a protected water source. Before I could touch it, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, intentional. I turned and found myself face to face with the last person I was hoping to see standing there alone with me at the lake. She didn't say anything at first. Neither did I. We just stood there with the twilight falling between us, the empty bottle still half hidden in the grass at my feet. Her eyes flicked down once, just a quick glance, and that single movement sent a chill through me. She knew I had found something. She finally broke the silence, voice overly casual. Said the trail was off limits, and that I should head home before fines started piling up. Felt rehearsed, like she had practiced those lines. I told her I was just passing through. I didn't mention the bottle. I wasn't ready to show my hand yet. When I did walk away, I could feel her eyes on my back. That night, a new email hit every resident's inbox. The HOA announced a temporary fishing ban for environmental safety. It felt targeted, made to look responsible while locking me out of the only place where evidence might surface. The comments on the neighborhood group chat turned brutal. Some neighbors blamed reckless fishermen. Others demanded stricter rules to protect property value. My name never appeared, but the message was clear. I was becoming the convenient villain. At the same time, another thread of tension started pulling tight. The woman I cared about became more distant. She'd been attending HOA meetings without telling me, just to stay informed, she claimed. But when I asked what was discussed, she deflected. Said the room felt hostile, that influential residents were pushing for a full lake closure. Her guarded tone unsettled me. I couldn't tell if she was protecting me or protecting herself. Meanwhile, the bottle vanished from the grass the very next morning. No maintenance workers had been scheduled. No cleanup teams dispatched. It was just gone. I began documenting everything quietly. Screenshots of complaint emails, photos of the closed trail signs that changed wording overnight, timestamps that didn't quite line up. With each detail, the story felt less like random environmental damage and more like a carefully managed narrative. But fear crept in the more I dug. What if I was wrong? What if accusing someone without proof destroyed innocent lives, including my own? I wasn't a hero. I was just one guy who wanted to fish in peace and found himself tangled in something much bigger. Late one night, while reviewing footage from a borrowed dashcam pointed toward the lake entrance, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A familiar vehicle passing through during the exact hour the water would have been poisoned. The license plate was half blurred by darkness, but I recognized the bumper stickers instantly. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Frame by frame, over and over, the bumper stickers were impossible to mistake. Pastel hearts layered beside a bold HOA crest decal. Her car. The footage timestamp lined up perfectly with the window when the lake contamination was first reported. My pulse hammered. I finally had something that wasn't suspicion or gut instinct. Something real. Still, it wasn't enough. No clear face. No readable license plate. Just association. Circumstantial. Fragile. And dangerous. The next HOA meeting was announced that morning. Emergency session. Closed to non-residents. Community safety update. I knew I had to be there. Inside the cramped clubhouse, tension hung thick. Folding chairs packed tight. Neighbors whispering. The board members sat stiff behind the long table. Legal folders stacked like shields in front of them. And there she was, perfectly composed, seated near the front. When our eyes met, she didn't blink. Just smiled. Small. Controlled. The water testing report was presented. The expert claimed trace irregularities, but nothing harmful to public health. Applause rippled across the room. Relief. Manufactured comfort. I stood up. My heart felt like it wanted out of my chest. I mentioned the missing bottle, the unusual camera angles, the dash cam footage. A ripple of murmurs swept the room. The board chair cut me off quickly, saying accusations without verified sources were irresponsible. Someone told me to sit down. She laughed under her breath. I sat, but not before slipping my phone out, starting a voice recording, just in case. After the meeting, she cornered me in the hallway, close enough for me to smell her perfume. Sharp, floral, impossible to ignore. "You should be careful," she whispered. "Digging into things that don't concern you can backfire." "I'm not the only one concerned," I said. She tilted her head, smiling again. "That's what you think." A second later, the woman I cared about appeared, tension written across her face. Why hadn't she texted during the meeting? Why did she look afraid? She gripped my arm. "We need to leave," she said urgently. Outside, emergency vehicles roared past toward the lake, lights flashing against the evening sky. Something had happened. Something big. And as sirens grew louder, my phone buzzed with an unknown incoming message. It contained just one line. "Stop asking questions, or the next contamination will be on you." My breath caught as I read the message again and again. "Stop asking questions, or the next contamination will be on you." I spun toward the lake entrance where flashing lights bounced against the dusk. Police cruisers, emergency trucks, neighbors running. No one knew what had happened, only that something at the water triggered another alarm. My first fear wasn't about the lake anymore. It was about me. The message felt less like a threat and more like a setup. If something else went wrong, I could be framed as the unstable fisherman who couldn't let things go. The perfect scapegoat. But the twist came from the person I trusted most. On the drive toward the lake checkpoint, the woman beside me finally broke down. Her hands shook on the dashboard. She admitted the HOA Karen hadn't acted alone. There were meetings I never knew about, private sessions between a few board members desperate to shut down public access to the lake permanently so they could push a waterfront development project. Fishing was only the excuse. The contamination scare was meant to justify full closure, not poison the water system. Someone was supposed to dump a harmless dye to stage a fake environmental incident, not chemicals. The plan had gone wrong. The woman who started all of this, she'd used something far more dangerous than anyone expected. Even worse, my girlfriend confessed she'd helped organize those meetings early on, not knowing the true plan, not knowing anything would touch the drinking water supply. She'd believed it was all paperwork and optics, no real harm. When things spiraled, fear kept her silent. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or the realization that the danger was bigger than a single HOA bully. At the checkpoint, we were turned away by officers establishing a safety perimeter. Neighbors clustered behind the barricades, some crying, some shouting demands for answers. The Karen was already there speaking with responders. Calm, cooperative, playing the role of concerned citizen flawlessly. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was a forwarded email chain, leaked from an anonymous sender. HOA board messages discussing staging environmental risk to force community compliance. And right beneath those emails, a scanned document bearing my name. A falsified complaint alleging I had threatened to sabotage the lake after the fishing ban. My chest tightened. Someone wasn't just trying to silence me anymore. They were preparing to erase me, legally. Across the barricade, Karen's eyes found mine. The smile was gone, replaced with something sharper.
Urgent.
Because she now knew I had proof, and she was running out of time. Everything moved fast after that, but somehow felt slow at the same time. I stepped past the barricade before I could overthink it, holding my phone up with the email thread glowing on the screen. Officers turned, confused, hands rising halfway before I called out, breath shaking. The HOA staged this. I've got proof. For a moment, no one listened. Then one officer took the phone. Another joined. Faces changed, professional comms snapping into focus as they scrolled through the messages that spelled it all out. Development deals, discussions of manipulating water safety reports, and mentions of using me as a distraction point. My girlfriend, shaking beside me, finally found her voice and confirmed everything. Her confession wasn't loud, but it was enough. Police separated the HOA Karen from the responders. That was when she broke. Not screaming, worse, explaining. She insisted she'd only meant to teach a lesson, to scare the board into closing the lake instantly. She claimed she believed the container she poured in held harmless dye. But the bottle she used had been swapped, mislabeled, something far more damaging than intended. She didn't check. Didn't care enough to double-check. Point one reckless choice stood between order and disaster. Watershed officials confirmed it. The contamination had started as a single deliberate act, not a natural event. The drinking water system was protected just in time by emergency valves triggered after detection. The worst-case scenario never happened. And then came the twist. The chemical bottle wasn't originally brought by her at all. Investigators traced it back to a local contractor tied to the same development group, someone who stood to profit massively if the lake access shut down permanently. He'd provided the bottle for the dye stunt, knowing exactly what it contained. He expected Karen to take the fall while the project moved forward quietly. She hadn't realized she was just another pawn. As officers moved both suspects into custody, I exhaled for the first time in weeks. The fishing ban ended. The HOA board was placed under external investigation. The forged documents against me were officially declared fraudulent. But not everything reset easily. The woman I loved stood beside me in the flashing blue lights, tears streaking her face. We didn't speak. Truth sat heavy between us. Some betrayals don't vanish just because the villains are caught. Before she walked away, she whispered, "I should have trusted you sooner." I watched her disappear into the crowd, knowing justice had been served, but something precious had still been lost. And as I looked back at the lake, now calm once more, I realized the quiet reflection on the water hid more secrets than I ever imagined. Because dangers don't always flow in from outside. Sometimes they come from the people closest to us. The weeks after everything came out felt quieter than the months of tension that led up to it. The lake reopened once the independent water tests confirmed the contamination had been fully cleared. Fresh signs were posted, not warnings this time, but explanations, detailing the new safety measures and ongoing oversight. Families slowly returned to the shoreline. Kids skipped stones again. Anglers set up their chairs under the same old trees, like nothing had ever happened. But for me, it never felt quite the same. The HOA Karen and the contractor both faced charges related to the poisoning attempt and falsifying reports. The HOA board dissolved under investigation, and the development project was shut down permanently. The false accusations against me were officially removed, along with a written apology from the management company that tried to bury the truth. My name was clean, but the experience left a mark I couldn't scrub away so easily. The woman I cared about kept her distance. We talked once, carefully, honestly. She explained her fear, her mistakes, her silence. And while I forgave her, I couldn't forget what the secrecy had cost us. Some trust, once cracked, never fully seals again. We parted not in anger, but in acceptance, both knowing that love doesn't always survive the weight of complicated truths. In the end, fishing became something different for me. It wasn't just an escape anymore. It reminded me of how fragile peace can be, how quickly ordinary routines can collide with hidden agendas. Standing on the same old dock, line cutting into the gentle current, I finally understood what that lake had taught me. That silence isn't safety, and comfort can hide corruption. The community changed, too. Neighbors who once avoided each other now shared conversations by the water's edge. Committees formed to oversee public resources. People stopped believing everything labeled official without asking questions. And I learned something personal in the process. Being quiet to keep the peace only protects the people willing to break it. As the sun dipped low over the lake one evening, I packed up my gear and paused before leaving. The water shimmered, calm and clear, a mirror of what the truth eventually became after weeks of lies. I spoke softly into the camera for the first time since it all began. Never ignore the small wrongs, because they're the ones that grow bold enough to harm everyone. If this story moved you, or reminded you how important speaking up can be, drop a like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who believes that one voice truly can make a difference.